Welcome everyone to the launch of Word Feast, Fredericton's Literary Festival. Bienvenue au lancement de notre 4e édition du Festival Word Feast, un festin de mots particulièrement spécial cette année, car nous vous offrons un service à domicile. This year is a special dine-in edition of our festival. To launch it, we will be hearing a talk by David Adams Richards, who will be introduced in a moment. But before we begin, I want to acknowledge that the land we are gathering on is the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Wolastoqey, and that the board of the Word Feast Literary Society is committed to building just and compassionate relationships with our First Peoples. Next, I extend my thanks to the sponsor of this event, St. Thomas University, which has generously allowed us to film this event in the Dr. Daniel O'Brien Study Hall before a small, appropriately distanced audience to enjoy one of its most accomplished alumni. Thank you to Jeffrey Carlton, Vice President of Communications, who made this possible. We would also like to thank our festival funders, the City of Fredericton through its Arts, Culture, and Heritage Funding Program, and the Province of New Brunswick's Department of Tourism, Heritage, and Culture, which provided funding through its Literary Promotion Program. The Honourable David Adams Richards is a member of the Canadian Senate and an acclaimed Canadian novelist, essayist, screenwriter, and poet. He is a member of the Order of New Brunswick and the Order of Canada. Richards is one of only 3 writers to have won Governor General's literary awards for both fiction and nonfiction, for Nights Below Station Street and Lines on the Water, A Fisherman's Life on the Miramichi, respectively. He is a co-winner of the Giller Prize for Mercy Among the Children and has been awarded New Brunswick's Alden Nolan Award for Excellence, the Matt Cohen Award for his distinguished lifetime contribution to Canadian literature, and the Commonwealth Writers' Prize. His writing is deeply rooted in the Miramichi and in New Brunswick and Canada, and at the same time explores universal truths, philosophical themes, and the human condition. His writing has been translated into 12 languages, and his books are on contemporary fiction and Canadian literature courses around the world. He is a sought-after speaker. We're very lucky that he's able to be here with us today. And the Writers' Federation of New Brunswick and St. Thomas University have both established annual awards in his name. His most recent novel, if I'm not mistaken, is Mary Sear, and I hope he'll tell us what he's working on right now. So thank you very much.
And thanks for that marvelous introduction, undeserved, but thank you very much. And I was talking to Nancy Bauer about age and getting older, and this talk is going to be dedicated to Robert Gibbs, my friend from years gone by. And Nancy was telling me that we are getting older. I remember when Alden Nolan phoned me up one time and asked me, he said, we need to have a party for the old man. This was about 1978. And I said, sure, we'll have a party for the old man, Alden. I said, what old man? He said, Ernest. He said, Ernest Buckler. Ernest is an old man. He's turning 70. I said, oh my God, that is old. Well, in a month and a half, I'll be turning 70, Ernest. We never got to have that party. Ernest, being very shy, didn't want one, but anyway. I'm going to read 2 essays and a poem about, in some respects, about courage, because we were talking about the pandemic, and I was asked if I could mention something about it, so I will read 2 short essays and then a poem I wrote about the French Fort Cove and how it's changed from the time I was young until now. So I'll begin with this short essay, and then I'll read one about about fishermen on the Miramichi that I wrote quite a while ago, called Northern New Brunswick. And then the poem that I will also read, and hopefully that'll not take up too much time. I was asked to give a talk to writers of my province today, and in a way I've been doing so most of my life. But like all the writers I knew and cared about, once knew, who are now gone, and those younger writers whom I do not know well, who have come along in these intervening years, most of us are alone and have worked and done our jobs in isolation. For that is the way of writers, or at least the writers I have cared about most. And there is no shame in that at all, and no cure for it either. So when I was asked today to give some comfort about the effects of the pandemic and how it isolates us or makes us poor, I can only say most of us have been isolated as a necessary component of doing our jobs. And many of us, though not all, many of us have been poor. And even though those who have money today might, like many of us at times have experienced, be out of money tomorrow. The vision of Dylan Thomas, who kindly rolled up the expensive rug in a friend's house so his wife Catelyn could dance for those assembled, only to be seen walking with the rug to a pawn shop 15 minutes later, might seem unusual to those who have not struggled for a year to write a poem. I am not advocating theft, I am stating a condition somewhat universal about those writers I knew and loved, Nolan, Curtis, Fraser, and others, and I too at times. Today the pandemic has swept over us, but it is not an unbearable thing, and like Marcus Aurelius has stated, if it is bearable, bear it then without complaint. I'm not at all saying we have been not tried here, and that things have been easy. I am saying that writers and artists, musicians and others, like all and each, have a duty to ourselves and one another, and this duty will see us through. We have a duty not only to ourselves, but to the larger community, to give to the world even a little of what that world yearns for or needs. If we are tired and tried, think of those truckers traveling in ice grades to bring diesel to forgotten villages in the north, or the nurses on the front line caring for the sick and dying, and our hearts will leap with joy at their greatness. And that will give us strength and purpose. Strength and purpose. I remember the bleak time far back in my career, so far back I would have blushed, I suppose, to even call it a career, when we sold our 20-year-old car to pay the rent, and my wife, to keep us alive, took a job selling Amway, and then helped order my manuscripts and retyped them at night. There was no one at that time who had much faith in me, but she had faith. Stretched to the limits at times, I am sure, but courageous too. Later, long after my early books, the struggles of my 20s and 30s, long after I was replaced as writer-in-residence at UMB, long after many skirmishes, I found myself quite implausibly well-known. And I sat with some well-known people at a dinner in Toronto one night where a professor who had studied at the University of Toronto and Harvard made the claim that he had given his life to Canadian letters. As true as that might have been for him and those exceptional people gathered there, I could say my wife had given her life to Canadian letters as well. So I wish to talk about duty now and duty forever. Perhaps it is an unfashionable topic in this day where everyone seems to have or want or need a grievance in order to establish whom they are. But we all have a duty here to overcome the time we are in and to realize that there will be a greater and grander time even if we cannot see it at the moment. So I wish to speak now about C.S. Lewis and the first servant in Shakespeare's King Lear. As C.S. Lewis says, the man is so insignificant in the play he doesn't even have a name, only first servant. The scene is the abominable blinding of old Gloucester, and those others in the scene like Regan and Edmund, as Lewis tells us, has fine long-term plans. They believe they know how the play will end in their favor. The first servant has no long-term plans, and he does not know or consider how the play will end. He only sees an abomination, and as a decent human being, he tries to stop it. He draws his sword and is stabbed in the back. He has appeared in 8 lines in the play, and he is gone. But he becomes the one most credited with mercy. He becomes the one we must try to emulate. What is so significant about this essay, The World's Last Night, is whom Lewis reads it to. He read it to a group of young men in Oxford. The time was 1940, and Britain stood alone against an indescribable enemy, an indescribable tyranny. There seemed, at this moment in British history, no hope left. The only thing Lewis could offer was that play and that servant. That was the only hope he could deliver. And it seemed a bleak hope, didn't it? The only thing he could tell his students was that those who believed they knew the ending, like Hitler and Göring, with their fine long-term plans, might not know the ending. He was telling these 18 and 19-year-old boys that they would need to do their duty to dignity and truth, and many of them might die doing so. Lewis was telling all of us that we do not know the ending, that we are not the writers, directors, or even producers of the play. We are the characters on stage. There will be at some point a light shining on us too, and we must act in accordance with our best script. So the pandemic is no more than a test for the first servant in all of us. The government will help us, but in the end, how we help others is the best part we will ever have to offer the other actors on the stage. Here we are, a nation, a small one to be sure, but that is not surprising. Our ancestors are the ones who are buried here in graveyards that look out toward the sea. There are no bathers on the gray stone beach today. Our majesty isn't found in the hot sun or burning wind, so both do come. On a beach as grand as any, the sand dunes are swept and the yellow grass stings and cries. Berries look adolescent most of the summer and open suddenly. Our men pick with the women. Few rent houses. When a young couple get married, they build their own. There are many fine and modest houses, but there are curious-looking ones too. Sometimes propped on logs, sometimes finished only long after the family has moved in. When a family builds his house, friends help with the neighbors. There is always a road, a highway. We live beside it. So our beauty is rough. It has shades like the soul. There are always fishing boats. There are always fishing men, lobster boats, drifters, trawlers, and the sea. It has become a part of the Acadian language, this water and this occupation. When Acadians say goodbye, they reflect their heritage so poignantly. What they're really saying is, I'll hope for you. In English towns, the small United Presbyterian and Baptist churches lay white and smooth in the afternoon, reflecting the heat and the sun on their windows. In the white pines that tower above them, you hear the trees talking to each other. Here there are gods. Only one has to breathe the air to appreciate them. No wonder the Mi'kmaq thought us blasphemers. Twilight reflects the Gothic world in the woods where the roads have been beaten back and water trickles into the shade. To youngsters who have grown up here, there is always a sense of wonder just before dark, the browning, the Acadians say. In the summer, I grew up where the night came as solid as a stone. It had the bleakness of a full tide in the dark. Only a few small cottages gave off their lights, and far away, a buoy now and again became a beacon from across that bay, and that was seen only at night. There are distances that are mysterious and primeval to the young. The smell of water, the spruce, are stunted by the salt wind. The grass turns white and curls inward like hair close to the bay. And inland barns can be forgotten for a generation, only to be discovered, explored, and claimed by the young. The sun burns on their backs, and their eyes reflect the icy waters. Fishermen don't sunbathe or carry radios and blankets through the sand, nor, for that matter, oil themselves with suntan lotion. Many can't swim and never have. They don't think of the summer for beaches or brown tans. For the fishermen, there is always something akin to deceit in that form of supplication. When they drift for salmon, they are gone all night. There are always legends, and when I was young, I heard the sea all night and knew what those legends were. I would not hear the sea now as I did then, for the gift only comes to the young and stays only as long as he is willing to remain under the spell. Here our triumph and tragedy is living in a land that contains so much power. It is not the tragedy of Greece or Rome or Arabian Nights. Theirs, as Camus has said, is beauty. Theirs is also its pints of gold, its sheer tragic need to be happy. Under a blanket listening to the night sea, the young never feel the need to be happy. Our stories are not of genies found in bottles on a beach shining with emerald power in a land that is both distant and sad to the tale-teller. We are too young for such legends, ours of human blood, animals known to us by touch, water that we've seen. Our bay is blue-green, and I'm often reminded of my early years when I smelled tar, for there was tar on all our wharves. When the sunbather was on the beach, he was safe. He was afforded a respect. There was no quarrel with him. Let him lie upon the beach and soak up the sun and worship as he would. Take radios if he would. The very young lie on the beach for no more than a moment. The very old have no use for it either. It is only for the idle, and in respect to so many about the sea, the adulteress. Let sun worshippers cringe if I say this. I don't imagine the sunbathers happy, for I've seen greatness in the fisherman's eyes. This is a personal observation, of course, one that comes with the territory. When the worshipping is over and the sunbather invades the wharf, then he loses his advantage. He is a sorry spectacle, out of place amid the true mirth. He becomes at once in his bathing suit and sandals a derelict. No one intends this. It is universal law. When the sea spoils and rises against itself, there are no swimmers, there are no windsurfers, there are fishing boats. The ignorant fishermen. I've heard jokes like this about them, so I meant it now. It shows the soul of the dark joker. There is always cowardice in their reflection. As the sunbather cannot see beyond the first buoy, so he cannot know the sea. I'll hope for you, the wives and loved ones say. That is, I'll hope not for your catch so much as your return. So I'm sure there are some. I've never met a fisherman who didn't care for the cleanliness of his boat or his house, who didn't keep things in order and order within reach. I've heard the stories. There are those who didn't come back. There have been boats found running and no one aboard. Everything was in place. The boat cut the water silently, all at the quiet of swells and the faint dimension of death. It might be observed that no one thinks of fishermen dying until they do. Strange, it's as if they went to the office in the morning. I know a man who lost 2 uncles to this bay and owns his own boat. He leaves land at 5 in the morning and his wife expects him home at 5 in the evening. I've never once seen fearless eyes except those who have faced danger. To lose fear, the philosopher might tell you, is to have faith. No one is prepared to die. To die for someone else shows that you understand, even in terrifying circumstances, mirth and spontaneity. Not that you are mirthful, but that you probably have been. There are gods in the wind too, in the salt air. They are here in the middle of the summer, anointing those who can sense them. 35 didn't come home one night. The storm has been assimilated into our thoughts, so I mention it briefly. Men in the water, having been tossed lifelines, handed them to their brothers. It took one man half the night to reach safety, and yet no sooner was he safe than he turned his boat back into the storm to help a friend whose boat had floundered. A man tied his son to the mast, and then before he could tie himself was swept overboard and disappeared. Boats, and you must realize how small a drifter can be in waters of 75 to 80 feet in height, refuse to leave others in trouble, and time after time threw lifelines and shouted encouragement and kept watch until the end. These men have a genius for deflating their own heroics. They can do it by exhaling smoke from a cigarette and looking away from you quickly, so one must not intrude upon their thought. Our gifts, our legends, are, as in every responsible nation, our own. We have breathed them into our blood. They are physical presences in a room, and we meet them on the stairs. I was for a walk with my son down the Mel Cove, the French Fort Cove, as we called it, where the Buckleys used to have a sawmill, and the quarry was there years and years ago, and where I grew up as a kid, and where I trapped rabbits and all that when I was a child. And I was walking up this rather gentrified path in the Mel Cove. It's become very gentrified now, and I took a weak spell. So my son ran to get water. John Thomas ran back to the truck to get me some water. And as I sat there, I remembered where I came from and what it is now. And I wrote this poem. And it is also about courage in a way, I hope. And I'll just read it. There is no longer any home here or anywhere beyond the long glare of sun and snow. It has gone away, my friend dead and old friends dying. And where we once snared rabbits and fished for trout is now a bike path where young children bike about in spandex shorts, and no darkness seems to enter in the trees, and no train whistle sounds out lonesome or otherwise anymore, and no drunken men lay down in their urine in the long summer grasses where we as children used to help them up, haul them by their arms to get them to their knees. Oh, what grand beauty in their soiled faces. A nickel falling out of outturned pockets and landing in those lost, forgotten places, the last drink of wine undrank and the grass swept by uneven breeze. Their eyes privy to 1,000 proud disgraces, remembering the swaggering bullets of that disremembered war, wine allowing them to fight great battles, yet scarred by battles they could not forget. And yes, there were wild berries there, and yes, a scope of wild berry trees, and the sweet smell of water, and Jimmy and Muzzy, Brian and me, all of us on that grade of hill, helping to his feet a man who fought valiantly, fighting still for country and crown at Ypres, Vimy, or Passchendaele. And it was we children, young boys of 8 or 9, that straightened their shirts and searched and found their hats and capped their wine and lifted them up sacredly, yes, quite sacredly, from the ground. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was moving and thoughtful and really inspiring. Your talk about courage and duty and where you have seen that, where you are from and what that has become and how we are living it and experiencing it today as well. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. What a treat to have been able to be here today in the beautiful setting of the Dr. Daniel O'Brien Study Hall. And thank you again to St. Thomas and to our funders for making this festival possible.